President Joe Biden heading to Saudi Arabia this week to discuss energy, feeling the need to defend his trip in a Washington Post op-ed. The president writing this, quote, "My views on human rights are clear and long-standing, and fundamental freedoms are always on the agenda when I travel abroad, as they will be during this trip." 2 years ago, then candidate Biden said he would make Saudi Arabia pay the price for the murder of Washington Post contributor Jamal Khashoggi, calling the nation a pariah. Joining me now, Florida Congressman Michael Waltz. He's a member of the House Armed Services Committee and a former Green Beret commander. Congressman, always a pleasure to talk to you. What do you expect to see during this trip to Saudi Arabia, and what will the U.S. get out of it potentially?
Well, yeah, Dagan, that op-ed was a bit rich, full of revisionist history where Biden claims to have stabilized the Middle East in the past year and completely ignores his appeasement strategy towards Iran with, yet more promises of pallets of cash. It's at the end of the day, if you have to pen an op-ed defending your trip, you've got issues in terms of your narrative. What do we expect to get at? What I expect to be on the agenda is the ceasefire with the Houthis in Yemen, greater cooperation with Israel, which is a good thing. Finally, I think the Abraham Accords may get some due attention in building on that. And of course, he'll be hat in hand begging the Saudis to produce more oil because he refuses to here in the United States. What I'd hope he'd also be discussing is Saudi Arabia's growing relationship with China and China's growing footprint in selling them drones and all types of other weapons, and reminding them who their strategic partner is, and also reminding the Saudis of the Chinese very close relationship with Iran, where they pledged $400 billion in security and other types of assistance. So that's what I hope he'll be there talking about. But I think the hat in hand for begging for pumping more oil is going to be first on his agenda.
Right. We've already seen kind of a preview of this. This started last summer. A little less than a year ago, when Biden, right out of the gate, implemented the moratorium, the ban on leasing, oil and natural gas leasing on federal land and water. Of course, a judge intervened to block that. But by, I think it was August of last year, that there was a letter that was sent begging Saudi Arabia to pump more oil, or begging OPEC Plus, which included Russia. This was before the attack, the invasion on Ukraine. So again, over and over, they keep doing the same thing, but expecting a different result.
Yeah, well, to add to that, he also sent his emissaries down to Venezuela, and that really blew back on them in Florida in particular. With our South Florida Hispanics who have truly lived and fled socialism, really making it well known that was unacceptable. And then, of course, they hope to ink the Iran deal. So to replace American oil and gas that Biden has launched his war on, he wants to do it with Venezuelan, Saudi, and Iranian oil and gas supplies. It's just an asinine policy, Dagan. And frankly, I don't think it's going to work, because I don't think they have the capacity nearly to match what we could have done if we would just unleash it.
Joe Concha, jump in here with the congressman.
Well, I just find it amazing that here we have Congressman Jamal Khashoggi, who was so brutally murdered a couple of years ago, and President Biden having the audacity to say that he would shun Saudi Arabia as a result of that murder when he was a candidate. Now that he's president and he needs oil, he's going there and he's going to beg, quite frankly, for oil because he won't drill here. Can Congress do anything when the GOP takes back the House? I'm not saying if, it's a when proposition at this point when you look at the numbers, to really expand our energy here at home, our energy independence here at home, or can the president just veto any effort around that?
Well, that would put the president in a. I think to answer your question most directly, it depends on if we get the Senate. Or whether we have a divided Congress. But, I think the president would be hard-pressed if gas prices continue as they are, if inflation continues as they are, to start vetoing common sense legislation coming out of the Congress when inflation and the economy are ranking number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in every poll that we're running, and we'll be heading into the 24 political season. So, look, I think we could put a lot of pressure on this administration to get back to American energy independence, and we're just counting the days, 6 more months.
Congressman, before we go, Biden is reportedly thinking about and this kind of goes to what you were talking about earlier, resuming arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Your take on that?
Well, the United States has been Saudi Arabia's traditional arms partner, and since Biden put the brakes on it as soon as he came into office, guess who's filled that void? China has. China is now selling Saudi Arabia armed drones. China is now Saudi Arabia's largest oil consumer. There's been discussions of actually paying for it in the yuan rather than the dollar. So China is all too happy to fill that void, and that is not in U.S. interest. That's not who we want as the main outside actor in the Middle East. But we've got to realize that the Cold War that I believe we're in with China, we just haven't fully recognized it, isn't just about Taiwan. It is being fought for influence all over the world, and the United States needs to keep that first and foremost.
We quickly have seen an Eastern axis develop between China, Russia, and now pulling other nations that used to be close allies of the United States toward China. And this was all by design, clearly. Thank you, Congressman. Great to see you this morning, always. Michael Waltz.
Thank you, Dagan.